After years of mystery and speculation, we finally have learned the truth about the God Valley incident. Chapter 1165 marks the end of what might be One Piece's most significant flashback to date. For a while, all that we knew about the God Valley incident was Sengoku's brief explanation in chapter 957. It was snippets about rocks, vague references to Garp becoming the hero of the Marines, but now in the big old year of 2025, we know everything. This includes the native hunting competition, the depravity of the celestial dragons, Imu's direct intervention, Rox's true identity as Davy D, the birth of the revolutionary army's ideals within the mind of Dragon, and how a baby named Shanks ended up in a treasure chest that was picked up by the Roger pirates. In this retrospective video, we're going to dive into every aspect of the God Valley incident, from the decades of build-up to the final consequences that echo throughout the present day of One Piece. I'll be talking about the key players, their motivations, and the battles that unfolded, and why this single event became the most tightly guarded secret in the history of the world government. In order to understand God Valley, we need to appreciate the 40 years that had led up to it. This wasn't a random event, it was the culmination of multiple converging storylines involving some of the era's most powerful figures. Let's begin with Rox D. Xebec, whose real name was Davy D. Xebec. He's a direct descendant of the legendary pirate Davy D. Jones from 800 years ago. Rox had survived by hiding in the shadows of the underworld, knowing that the world government had been systematically trying to eliminate his bloodline for centuries. 46 years before the present timeline, Rox managed something incredible. He infiltrated Merijo during a reverie, he eliminated an admiral, he took 5 kings hostage, and he broke into Imu's private quarters, the Room of the Flowers. He tried to force Imu into submission but failed. As he escaped, he swore that he'd return one day. Rox then stumbles into Harold, who was also infiltrating that year's reverie. Harold's presence there requires its own explanation. At that time, Harold was nothing like the peace-seeking king that he'd later become. He was arrogant, violent, and enjoyed causing destruction. He led a wild childhood alongside Dory and Broggy, and his royal status combined with his ancient giant blood made him insufferable. But during that reverie infiltration, Harold had no choice but to work with Rox to avoid enslavement. Together, they blasted their way through Merijo and jumped off of the Red Line. This first meeting sparked a relationship that would span decades. Rox, impressed by Harold's strength, began visiting Elbaf repeatedly over the years, trying to recruit him. Harold's transformation from warmongering prince to peace-seeking king came gradually. He was heavily influenced by Ada, a giant woman that he had rescued from a circus in the Bunt Kingdom. Harold had initially believed the humans had captured her, so he decimated the kingdom and brought her along with him. But Ida slapped him and explained that those humans had saved her from dying. She scolded Harold for looking down on humans because of his superior size. They then returned to help reconstruct the Bunt Kingdom, and through Ida's influence, Harold began to change. 105 years before the present timeline, Harold, who was a king at the age of 45, announced to the citizens of Elbaf his vision to build connections with other nations, learn from their cultures, improve their lives without violence. This wasn't popular because many giants had seen this as weakness, but Harold persisted. He ended up having a son called Hajruddin with Ida, though he couldn't marry her since she wasn't from Elbaf. And later he entered an arranged marriage with Estrid, who gave birth to Loki 63 years before the present timeline. Meanwhile, Rox was building his own empire. 4 years after his meeting with Harold at the Reverie, Rox successfully conquered Hachinozu. He finally founded the Rox Pirates, converting the island into his base of operations and attracting legendary criminals like Charlotte Linlin, Edward Newgate, Shiki, John, and a young Kaido. Rox had a specific plan for world domination, and he told his crew that he still needed 2 specific devil fruits, the legendary Galila band of giant shipwrights and King Harold, to accomplish it. The Galila detail is significant. This group of giant warrior shipwrights have been captured and imprisoned centuries ago, likely by the world government. Jarl mentioned to Harold that he had also heard rumors of an army of giants frozen in ice somewhere. The world government clearly had a history of neutralizing Elbaf's military power, which explains their desperation to control the nation ahead of the coming Great War. Rox kept returning to Elbaf trying to recruit Harold, even after becoming a notorious pirate captain. Their relationship was complex, respect mixed with fundamental disagreement. Harold questioned the loyalty of Rox's crew members, noting revealing that none of them actually cared about their captain, they just wanted the Hachinozu riches. Rox never denied this, but young Loki, Harold's son, was captivated by Rox's ambition to rule the world. Loki's childhood was tragic. When Estrid gave birth to him, she looked at his eyes and became horrified, demanding that he be killed. When the guards refused, she threw him down into the underworld. Loki survived and climbed back up, but the damage was done. Estrid began blaming every misfortune that happened to Elbaf on Loki's curse. The death of Jorul at Linlin's hands, natural disasters, famine, everything. It was because of Loki apparently. Loki grew up isolated, violent, and desperate for purpose. When Rox and his crew, including Newgate, Shiki, and Buckingham Stussy, got lost trying to find their way to the Sunworld, they encountered the young Loki. Rox had asked if they were at Elbaf and if they could find Harold there. When Loki gave attitude back, Rox seriously wounded him with his sword, not out of cruelty, but to force a situation where Harold would feel obligated to return immediately. This incident brought Rox and Harold together again, with Rox bringing his companions, which included Ochuko, Don Marlon, and Ganzui, to Orest Castle. Rox invited Harold to join his crew once more, but Harold refused, stating that it would clash with his ideals for Elbaf. This pattern continued for years, Rox visiting, asking Harold to join, being refused, and maintaining an odd friendship. Harold's efforts at diplomacy with other nations repeatedly hit roadblocks because of world government interference. 56 years before the present, after the reverie where Rox had infiltrated, Harold discussed with Jarl how the council hadn't heard him out. Harold had snuck in thanks to a fellow king, but had to escape to avoid capture. The world government remained cautious about accepting Elbaf, only allowing a few giants into the Marines, but never seriously considering the nation as an affiliate. This frustrated Vice Admiral Garp, Sengoku, and Suru, who saw the strategic value in aligning with Elbaf. Harold even jeopardized his own nation's prospects by attacking a world government battleship at Enishi to protect its citizens from imprisonment by government agents. The propaganda portrayed Harold and Elbaf negatively, leading Harold to shave his own hair as a gesture of goodwill, but still the world government wouldn't budge. This is where Shakuyaku enters. 42 years before the present timeline, Shakuyaku left her position as captain of the Kuja pirates, and she moved to Hachinozu to open up her bar, using it as protection from the Marines. This woman wasn't just any pirate, she was beloved, iconic, and considered to be an idol for her strength and beauty. The Kuja pirates, under her leadership, had become massively popular, even more so than under her predecessor Gloriosa. Shaki quickly became Hachinozu's treasure. Rox and his crew adored her. The Roger pirates, however, had their own designs. Goldie Roger was infatuated with Shaki and wanted her as a crewmate. The Roger pirates even fought the Kuja pirates trying to take her, but were easily defeated because they were too infatuated to fight properly. Despite being rivals, both Rox and Roger pirates would visit Shaki's bar, taking advantage of her no fighting rule to drink together without killing each other. Now here's where Gloriosa fits in. She had actually contracted lovesickness, but not for just anyone. Gloriosa had fallen for Goldie Roger himself. This unrequited love, this sickness had driven her from the Kuja tribe. At God Valley, Gloriosa would be present and still hoping that if she helped rescue Shaki, Roger might finally notice her. The five elders began recognizing that Rox was becoming too powerful and that Harold's pacifism was preventing Elbaf from joining them. They made a calculated offer to Harold, asking him to kill Rox, and they'd finally accept Elbaf into the world government. Harold initially hesitated, but he eventually agreed to the demand of the elders. The next time Rox came to Elbaf, they fought. The duel was fierce, destructive, but it reached no conclusion. Afterwards, Rox eventually gave up on recruiting Harold, and both men parted ways, assuming that they'd never see each other again until a certain incident. Rox had bigger problems. 40 years before the present timeline, the God Knights, led by Figurland Garling, arrived at God Valley. They discovered the island's abundant natural resources, and more importantly, that the Davy family was living there in hiding. Garling offered the island world government membership. The people had refused, and during the visit, Garling met a local woman who would bear his twin sons Shanks and Shamrock, who were born a year later. Rox was aware that God Valley was the Davy family's safe haven, and he had sent his wife Eris and their son Marshall D teach there 2 years prior, believing that they'd be protected by his clan. Garling, rejected by God Valley and seeing an opportunity to eliminate the Davy bloodline, proposed making the island the site of the next native hunting competition. The pretense was that the island's name God Valley was blasphemous to the celestial dragons, but the real reason was that this was a punishment for refusing the world government and a chance to wipe out the Davy family once and for all. 1 year before the competition, disaster struck Hachinozu. Don Marlon, who was leading the night security team, was killed along with his entire squad. Shakuyaku was then kidnapped, and the culprit was Ochoku, who had been bribed by the world government to allow this to happen. Ochoku gleefully counted his blood money while the entire pirate world descended into chaos. Shaki wasn't just popular, she was beloved by pirates everywhere. Her kidnapping caused the world economy of One Piece to grind to a halt for weeks. Nobody was conducting any business. Everyone was either searching for her or in despair. When Roger received the news, he was furious. Rayleigh had trembled with rage, and Rox, well, he was already planning his move, because he knew that his family was on God Valley, and if Shaki's kidnapping was related to that island, then something terrible was about to happen. 38 years before the present timeline, Garling returned to God Valley. He met his twin sons Shanks and Shamrock and their mother. She was overjoyed to see him, hoping that he'd come to be with his family, but instead, Garling coldly declared that the island would soon cease to exist. He explained that he already had a candidate for a wife who was Shakuyaku, who would become his if he won the native hunting competition. He then stabbed the mother of his children and left her to die. Several Marines disembarked on the island. Among them was a young cadet named Monkey D. Dragon. They'd been told that this was a training exercise to round up civilians using tranquilizer rounds. Dragon, who was idealistic and obedient, followed orders, but he discovered Shanks and Shamrock's dying mother, who had begged him to save her children from Garling's corruption. She wanted them raised as kind-hearted people, not twisted by their father's evil. As she died, Dragon swore that he'd find her children and save them. Meanwhile, the slaves that were being transported to God Valley for the competition were conspiring with each other to leak information. Ginny and Ivankov got word to Big News Morgans, and Cypherport tried to bribe Morgans into silence, but he published the story anyway, and the information had reached Hachinozu, and the response was immediate. The Rocks pirates mobilized, but their motivations varied wildly. Some wanted Shaki back out of genuine affection, others were after the devil fruits that were being offered as prizes for the competition, as there were multiple rare devil fruits as rewards. Shiki claimed whoever rescued Shaki first would make her fall in love with them. John argued that she'd fall for whoever got the most treasure. Lin cynically stated that no matter how much chaos they caused, Shaki wouldn't pay attention to any of them. Whitebeard, in a moment of unintentional humor, said that he wanted to rescue her as a friend but wouldn't mind if she happened to fall for him, which annoyed Stussy. Gloriosa, tagging along, wondered if Roger would finally be grateful to her if she rescued Shaki. Struzen noted that Ochoku had chosen to stay on Hachinozu, as he wondered if Shaki would ban him from her bar for life because of his betrayal. And as for Kaido, he just wanted to know if Big Mom would get him a good devil fruit. Their captain Rox had one objective though. He needed to rescue Eris and teach. His crew didn't know about his family. This was personal and he was keeping it a secret. The Roger pirates also mobilized as they learned Shaki was the grand prize, and Roger declared that he was going to rescue her and no one else would have a shot. His crew promptly ignored him and trampled him in their rush to help. Roger's confidence was admirable, but his crew's enthusiasm was uncontrollable. When word reached Marineford that both the Rocks and Roger pirates were heading to God Valley, Fleet Admiral Kong requested Garp's presence. Garp was on vacation and initially refused, as he despised the world nobles and didn't want to protect them. The God Knights should be enough, he argued, but then Kong mentioned that Garp's longtime rival Roger was also heading there. Garp immediately changed his mind. His competitive pride wouldn't let Roger have all of the action. On their way to God Valley, the Rocks pirates encountered the ship of Harold. The world government had ordered the Giant King to intercept and kill Rocks as proof of Elbaf's loyalty to the world government. Harold didn't want to do it, but he'd accepted the deal. However, Rocks asked to speak privately first. Once alone, Rocks revealed his greatest secret, that his real name was Davy D. Zebek, and he was a direct direct descendant of Davy D. Jones, and the world government had been trying to erase his bloodline for 800 years. He'd survived by hiding in the underworld's shadows. Rox explained that his wife and son were on God Valley with the Davy family, and this entire competition was a trap to lure him out. He believed that the world nobles' involvement was their fatal mistake. They wouldn't expect him to actually show up. Rox asked Harold for help one final time, saying he didn't think that he'd survive this incident. Harold refused. Despite their decades of friendship, Harold couldn't abandon his deal with the Five Elders. The two clashed briefly. It was a clash powerful enough to set Harold's ship ablaze, but Rox and his crew escaped. That was the last time Harold and Rox spoke as allies, as their friendship was over. The native hunting competition kicked off with approximately 200 world nobles participating. Among them were god knights like Vigilant Garling, Shepard Summers, and Manmiya Gonko. Also in attendance was J. Garcia Satin of the Five Elders. The event was broadcast live to Merijo, where other world nobles watched from the comfort of their palaces, placing bets and cheering. The targets were categorized by point value. There were around 100,000 regular civilians marked as rabbits, then 150 rare rabbits. These were individuals considered more valuable targets, and finally 13 super rare rabbits. These were people viewed as extremely dangerous to the world noble system. These included Buccaneer Bartholomew Kuma and several members of the Davy family. During the opening ceremony, these super rare rabbits were paraded before the world nobles, who jeered and mocked them. The grand prize for winning was Shakuyaku herself. She had been kept clean and well fed, presented as property that could be claimed either as a wife or a slave, depending on the winner's preference. Garling intended to make her his wife. Summers, a particularly sadistic world noble, planned to make her his personal slave, and other celestial dragons openly discussed who they'd torture first, treating human beings like collectible trophies. Before the hunt officially started, there was already bloodshed. Garling executed God Valley's king for protesting the use of his people as targets. This earned Garling a penalty for starting early, but he didn't care. The message was sent. Resistance was futile. When the competition began, after giving civilians a 1-hour head start, the depravity was immediate and absolute. Entire families were slaughtered as they tried to hide. The world nobles laughed, celebrated, and treated it like a holiday. Manmiya Gonko, dubbed the Blade of God and a pet devoted to these celestial dragons, cut down multiple people with precision and grace. Shepard Summers chased a young boy up a tree, placed thorns beneath it, and watched gleefully as both the boy and his father fell onto the spikes and were impaled. The father had tried to rescue his son, and Summers enjoyed watching them die together. Dragon witnessed all of this. He became physically ill, vomiting at the carnage. He knew that defying a world noble meant his entire platoon would be slaughtered in retaliation, so he tried to stay silent and to follow orders. But when he had saw a world noble preparing to shoot Kuma, who was listening to Ivankov give a hopeful speech to other slaves, Dragon snapped. He couldn't stand by anymore. He tranquilized the world noble, then immediately panicked, realizing what he'd just done. But before anyone else could react, the pirates arrived. The Rox pirates made landfall from the southeast, the Roger pirates came from the northwest, and several other pirate crews attacked from all directions, completely overwhelming the stationed marines. The marines were unprepared and outnumbered, their morale plummeting until Garp arrived with reinforcements. His presence changed everything, but Roger and Rox immediately took notice, and their attention was drawn to the hero of the marines, who just crashed their party. The God Knights were dispatched to protect and evacuate the world nobles, but they soon split to fulfill specific duties. Satchel's Mafi was tasked with retrieving Garling's children. A member of the Manmeyer family was assigned to suppress any civilians attempting to escape, and she did so by shooting them down from a distance with ruthless efficiency. No one was allowed to leave. Dragon, still carrying Shanks and Shamrock in his arms, tried to reach a marine ship. He wore a disguise to avoid being recognized, but Saint Satchel's Mafi of the God Knights tracked him down and shot him in the shoulder. Dragon dropped Shamrock and Shanks as he rolls out of sight into some debris. Mafi picked up Shamrock, completely unaware that Garling had twin sons. She assumed that she completed her mission and prepared to execute Dragon for interfering. Before she could strike the killing blow, Whitebeard's random attack aimed at someone else entirely cuts Mafi's body, inadvertently saving Dragon's life. Dragon watched as Whitebeard, Big Mom, Shiki and Kaido charged forward. Minor pirate crews, hoping to make a name for themselves, ambushed ambushed the Rocks pirates, but it was a catastrophic mistake. Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, and Shiki easily annihilated them without breaking a sweat. Then Garp showed up and attacked the 4 Rocks pirates directly. They reluctantly fled, not out of fear, but because prolonging the fight would waste time. Although Kaido did want to stay and fight Garp, but the others dragged him along. In the confusion, Dragon noticed Shanks on the ground, unconscious but alive. He wanted to save both twins, but Maffy had already left with Shamrock. Dragon accepted his failure, as he resolved to at least save one of the children that he still had. Meanwhile, the chaos intensified. Pirates began attacking each other for the treasure and prizes. The Marines tried to maintain order, but were hopelessly outnumbered. World nobles screamed and fled in terror. Garling was furious that his game was being ruined, and he lamented that the competition had ended early. Roger was engaged in combat with Whitebeard, and he couldn't break away, so he tasked Silver's Rayleigh and Scopper-Gaman with retrieving Shaki. They fought their way through Marines and rival pirates, determined to reach her before anyone else. They arrived at the chamber where Shaki was detained. Despite being chained, Shaki had already defeated every Marine guarding her. They weren't weak soldiers, they were trained guards, but Shaki's strength and skill were undeniable. Shepard Summers entered, intending to claim her for himself, but when he realized that the competition was being ruined by the pirate invasion, his plans changed. Summers said that he hated women who knew how valuable they were, as he preferred them to be naive. He slapped Shaki, but she turned and kicked his arm hard enough to stagger him. Summers grabbed her leg and struck her thigh, knocking her to the ground. Then he admitted something chilling. All these pirates had ruined their fun event, but if they hadn't shown up, Garling would have won Shaki anyway, so Summers decided to just kill her. That way no one could have her. Summers gushed at the thought of all the pirates who came to rescue her, falling into despair when they saw her mangled corpse. He raised his weapon, telling Shaki that he'd kill her in 5 blows so she could savor the pain of each one. Shaki began to despair. Summers mocked her, saying no hero was going to swoop in and rescue her like some fairy tale, and if they tried, he'd kill them too. But just as Summers prepared to strike, Rayleigh burst through the wall and blew Summers away with his sword technique. Rayleigh offered his hand to Shaki and told her he came for her. Shaki sobbed into his arms, saying how relieved she was and how terrified that she'd been. Rayleigh promised that he'd never let her go through that ordeal again. Roger and Gaban, both crying tears of joy, told Rayleigh to save the reunion for later. Roger announced that they'd successfully retrieved Shaki, now they just needed to grab some treasure and flee the island. The Roger pirates, with Shaki secured, began their retreat. Some pirates tried to intercept them to claim Shaki for themselves, but Shiki stopped them, not wanting Shaki to get hurt in the crossfire. He ordered everyone to focus on the treasure instead. As Rayleigh carried Shaki towards the Oro Jackson, he tried to tell her something that he'd been holding back, but Shaki simply smiled and said she already knew. Their bond forged through this chaos would last for the rest of their lives. While the main battles raged, Kuma and Ivankov snuck into the primary treasury as planned. Their goal was simple: steal devil fruits and escape. They found the devil fruits that were the prizes for the world nobles and prepared to eat them, but Big Mom barged in and snatched the Uo no Mi model Seiryu right from Ivankov's hands. She tried to grab the Nikyu no Mi too, but Kuma was faster, eating it before she could react. Big Mom was furious but couldn't do anything about it. Ivankov urged Kuma to use his new power to save himself. If even one person escaped God Valley, they'd consider it their victory. Kuma nodded, already planning to save as many people as possible. Big Mom left the treasury carrying the Uo no Mi, planning to give it to her son Katakuri. This fruit would be a massive boost for her crew. It's a mythical Zoan that would make Katakuri a legendary fighter, but Kaido had other ideas. He attacked Big Mom from behind and stole the fruit, devouring it before she could stop him. Big Mom cursed him, screaming that he now owed her for the rest of his life. Kaido rejected this debt, stating that he simply got to it first. Before they parted ways, Big Mom told him that she'd collect what he owed someday. Kaido replied that he'd be waiting to crush her when she tried. This moment planted the seeds of their eventual alliance and rivalry in Wano decades later. Meanwhile, at the second treasury, the Roger pirates fought off the Rocks pirates and others who were trying to claim treasure. The Marines prioritized preventing pirates from escaping rather than protecting the treasure itself. Some civilians managed to reach the shore and begged the station Marines to save them. The Marines shot them dead, coldly stating that they were under no obligation to help a nation unaffiliated with the world government. Jay Garcia sat and watched the chaos unfold from a distance. He contacted Imu, reporting that he didn't know if Rox was dead yet, but he believed that this level of destruction would birth something entirely new. Imu responded that they couldn't allow that to happen. Kuma, now possessing the Nikyo Numi's power, began teleporting people off of the island. He saved former slaves, civilians, and anyone that he could reach. Over 500 people owed their lives to Kuma's heroism that day, including Ginny, Ivankov, Marshall D. Teach, and Eris. Those he saved were overwhelmed with gratitude, though Kuma was too focused on saving more lives to acknowledge their thanks. As pirates continued fighting each other over treasure, Captain John made his move. He decided to betray the Rox pirates entirely and leave with all of the loot. John revealed himself as the user of the Jiki no Mi, the magnetism devil fruit later possessed by Eustace Kid. He used its power to attract all metal on God Valley toward himself. This includes weapons, treasure, coins, armor, anything made of metal flew across the island. This caused catastrophic collateral damage. Dragon, who just reached a marine ship, was about to board with Shanks, and he was yanked backwards by his sword and armor. The impact knocked him unconscious. Shanks, unattended and confused, crawled into a nearby treasure chest to hide. That chest, filled with valuable loot, was later picked up by Taro of the Roger pirates. Shanks' fate was being raised by the Roger pirates and eventually becoming one of the Yonko, and it was sealed by pure accident. Ganzui witnessed John's treachery and attacked him. Ganzui was the user of the Bomu no Mi, the explosion devil fruit later used by Mr. 5 of Baroque Works. He flicked a piece of grime at John, which detonated on impact and knocked John unconscious. Shiki tried to claim the treasure for himself, but Ganzui attacked him too, refusing to let anyone take advantage of John's betrayal. John, however, was tougher than expected. He survived Ganzui's attack and managed to escape with some treasure. His betrayal was one of many fractures that day that signaled the end of the Rox pirates. We then see Rox, who defeated Garling and his initial attackers. He finally located Eris and Teach as he grabbed them both and started running, but Garling wasn't finished. He chased after them with another God Knight and several demons. These were transformed members of the Davy family, including Rox's own father and grandmother. Rox was horrified. How were his family members regenerating from every injury? How had the people who were supposed to be hunted become his enemies? Garling taunted him, explaining that now they knew Rox was a part of the Davy family. Killing him would salvage the ruined competition. The native hunting competition might have been interrupted by pirates, but executing Davy D. Zebek himself would be an acceptable substitute. During the chase, Eris demanded Rox put her down. She knew he couldn't fight effectively while protecting her. Eris reminded Rox that she had fully accepted herself as a member of the Davy family, aware of the endless agony that came with it. The Davy clan had treated her with kindness despite her past as a pirate, and she'd embraced them as her own. Eris told Rox that he never would have fallen in love with her if all she did was cling to him for protection. She wanted him to trust her to handle herself and teach. Rox, moved by her strength, lets her go. Eris promised that if capture seemed inevitable, then she'd take both her life and Teach's. They'd die free rather than let the world government torture them. They agreed to reunite in Lelusia once the nightmare had ended. Rox stands his ground and fights as he defeats Garling in brutal combat, then slaughters the transformed demons, including his own father and grandmother. He was forced to kill his possessed family to protect his wife and child. The emotional toll was devastating, but Rox pushed forward. He had to survive. He had to see Eris and Teach again. But then Rox, Roger, and Garp all felt something. An overwhelming, unnatural presence. Whitebeard found Rox, stating that there was no reason for him to help, but he'd do it anyway. Rox told him not to sweat it, as Kaido, now transformed into his full Seiryu dragon form, descends before them to show off his new powers. Rox praises him, but Whitebeard asks what that burst of power that all just felt was. And it appears. Imu manifests by possessing Jay Garcia's Saturn's body, fusing with his Gyuki form. The transformation is grotesque. As Garcia grows spider legs, he becomes a monstrous amalgamation of human and beast, radiating malevolence. Imu began attacking indiscriminately, killing marines and pirates alike. It was clear that they weren't on anyone's side. They were on their own side, the side of absolute control. The marines were ordered to fall back and not engage, Roger ordered Gaban to help the rest of the crew seize treasure while he headed towards Saturn and Imu. Garp demanded to know what had just happened. A nearby soldier struggles to explain it beyond Saturn has transformed. Garp, upon learning this was one of the 5 elders, declared that the appearance befitted a freak ruling over the maggots of Merijo. His subordinates tried to remind him not to slander the world nobles, but Garp didn't care. He charged forward, stating he only saw vermin, not a supreme ruler. Meanwhile, Rox addresses Imu directly, asking if they came to kill him. Imu responded by calling Rox Davy Jones. Rox corrects them, stating he'd never met the legendary pirate, though he was his descendant. But Rox said he felt a certain promise which needed to be kept. Imu screamed that this was precisely why they wanted to rid the world of the Davy family. Once they were gone, their world would finally be complete. Rox responds by saying that the world wasn't theirs. He attacked Imu as Garp charged in to provide backup. Roger, Whitebeard, Kaido, and Big Mom all converged on Imu. They unleashed simultaneous Supreme King Haki-infused attacks, 6 of the era's most powerful fighters striking at the same time. The combined assault obliterated Imu's body, reducing it to scattered pieces, but Imu simply regenerated. Their body reconstituted itself as if nothing had happened. Then Imu unleashed a blast of Supreme King Haki so overwhelming that it knocked out hundreds of people across the battlefield. The message was clear: Imu was untouchable. Imu then revealed that they could see Eris and Teach running through the forest. They then declared that they wouldn't allow new members of the Davy family to be unleashed onto the world. Rox attacks desperately, screaming at Imu not to do whatever they were thinking, but Imu declares Rox would be the one to kill them, as Imu stabs Rox with a blade and uses Domi Reversi, a technique that transforms people into demons. Rox screamed in agony as the transformation began. Rox had tried to fight the transformation with everything that he had. Imu called him persistent, but Rox declared that they were underestimating the strength of human will. He screamed that he believed Davy D. Jones was once the king of the world. Imu then is enraged as they insisted Jones was never king of anything, that the animosity between them had nothing to do with Rox personally. But Rox saw through the fear. Imu was terrified that someone would inherit Jones's will and fulfill the promise that Rox kept mentioning. Rox asked what terrified them more, Jones or Joyboy. Imu demands for him to be silent and announces that once Rox was eliminated, their kind would never be seen again. Then Imu revealed something crucial. They had found the perfect soldiers, the giants of Elbaf. Imu stated that the giants were currently harmless and internally conflicted, and they were easy to mold. Rox then became enraged, demanding Imu to leave Harold out of their plans. Harold only wanted peace for his people, but Imu declared that Harold's desire for peace was exactly what made him the perfect puppet. Just as they were molding Rox into their puppet now, Imu ordered Rox to end his own bloodline and kill everyone else on the island. They slammed Rox into the ground, completing the transformation. Rox, now a demon, stands up. His eyes were empty, his movements mechanical. Big Mom and Kaido approached asking what had happened, as Rox declared that there was blood he needed to exterminate. In an instant, he grabs Kaido and slams him into the mountain so hard that it shatters. Big Mom then attacks, but Rox easily dispatches her too. Whitebeard stood his ground and matched Rox's attack with his own. The resulting shockwave was so powerful that it split the northeast mountain in half, causing it to collapse and crush parts of the nearby armadas. Rox then began his hunt for Eris and Teach. The Marines were ordered to keep their distance from the island and prioritize evacuating the world nobles. Pirates tried to flee with whatever treasure that they'd secured. Kyo ordered his men to steal Rox's ship and escape, knowing that their captain wouldn't return. Shiki confirmed that day marked the end of the Rox pirates. Rox caught up to Eris and Teach at the shore. Where Eris saw him, she realized what had happened. She held Teach close and told them that they'd jump into the sea and swim away if necessary. But the station Marines opened fire on them. Just before Rox's blade could strike them, Bartholomew Kuma teleported both Eris and Teach away. Kuma, having seen them from a distance, used his new Devil Fruit power to save them. He then teleported himself to safety as well, as Rox's slash destroyed the Marine ship instead, though he still got hit by cannon fire. Seeing the explosion in the distance, Imu ordered Rox to continue killing everyone remaining on the island. No witnesses could be left alive. Garp and Roger then confront the possessed Rox. They both notice tears streaming down his face despite his violent actions. Then they heard something impossible, Rox's voice in their heads. This was transmitted through the voice of all things. He was begging them to kill him. After confirming they'd both heard the same thing, Garp and Roger began their fight. Neither could land lasting damage. Rox was just too strong, too fast, and he was enhanced by Imu's demonic transformation. He easily blew them into the remains of the island's mountains. Every attack that they landed, Rox regenerated from. The sheer amount of haki being released by all three combatants was destroying what remained of God Valley, splitting the skies above. Garp and Roger ordered their respective crews to leave without them, promising to return no matter what. As they threw off their coats, both lamented how things hadn't gone as planned. Garp had wanted to arrest both Roger and Rox. Roger had just wanted Shaki and some treasure, but with Rox rampaging under Imu's control, they had no choice but to work together. The battle was exhausting. Garp dodged Rox's sword strikes while Roger knocked him into mountain walls. Garp grabbed Rox's foot and asked if there was any way to turn him back to normal before flinging him away. Roger yelled to Rox to wake up to fight back against Imu's control, but it was useless. Roger explained to Garp that armament haki couldn't counteract devil fruit powers, and he'd been using Supreme King haki throughout the fight, thinking he was damaging Rox. Garp confirmed this, but stated that Rox countered with his own Supreme King haki, cancelling each other out. Roger believed that the only way to defeat Rox was to increase the mass of Supreme King haki that they both emitted. If they didn't, then they'd never win this battle of attrition. They both knew this would deplete their stamina completely. They might die from the exertion, but if they didn't do this, then they'd die anyway. Rox would kill them, then continue his rampage across God Valley and beyond. Garp yelled to Rox that he didn't know what happened to him, and he didn't believe anything he said would console him. But Garp understood how frustrated Rox felt over his lack of control. Rox had been forced to attack his own family, to hunt the very people he had come to save. The cruelty of it was unbearable. Roger and Garp unleashed their final attacks, massive concentrations of Supreme King haki that dwarfed anything that they'd used before. The attacks struck Rox simultaneously, finally overwhelming even his enhanced demon body. The impact was cataclysmic and it was visible from miles away. Rox D. Zebek, Davy D. Zebek, ended up falling. The man who'd wanted to conquer the world, who'd challenged Imu directly, who tried to save his family, died as a puppet forced to betray everything that he loved. Following the death of Rox, something impossible happened. God Valley started to vanish. The island didn't sink, it simply disappeared, as if erased from existence. Rox's death seemed to trigger some mechanism or some power of Imu's that removed the entire island from the world. It no longer appeared on maps. Cartographers who tried to chart it found nothing but empty ocean. The island, its history, its people were all gone without a trace. The world government moved immediately to suppress information. Marine Base G11 and CP6 were tasked with erasing all records. The names of the inhabitants, the location of the island, the number of casualties, everything was purged. They labeled it S-level top secret classification, the highest level of government secrecy. Anyone who'd been on God Valley was warned to never speak of it. Those who tried to report what happened vanished mysteriously. The official narrative was simple: nothing happened. God Valley never existed. The Rox pirates disbanded because their captain died in an unrelated incident. Garp and Roger never worked together. The world nobles never held a hunting competition. Shakuyaku was never kidnapped. The Davy family didn't exist, but the consequences were impossible to hide. Garp ended up becoming the hero of the Marines for his role in the incident. The world government praised him, offered him promotion after promotion to admiral, but Garp refused every single one. He wouldn't become a direct subordinate of the world nobles, not after seeing what they were capable of at God Valley. Garp chose to remain as a vice admiral, using his position to protect weaker marines from the system's corruption. Vigilant Garling was declared the champion of God Valley despite the competition being interrupted. His reward, well, he'd eventually become supreme commander of the God Knights, one of the most powerful positions in the world government. Goldie Roger's involvement was covered up entirely. The world government couldn't admit that a pirate had helped save them, so they erased his role completely. completely. Only those present knew the truth, that Roger and Garp had fought side by side. The Rocks pirates disbanded, with their captain dead and their shared goals dissolved. There was no reason to stay together. Whitebeard formed the Whitebeard Pirates, Big Mom established the Big Mom Pirates, Kaido eventually created the Breast Pirates, and Shiki formed the Golden Lion Pirates. Captain John became a treasure-obsessed wanderer until his eventual death. Each of them became legendary pirate captains in their own right, but they never spoke of their time with Rocks. The existence of the Rocks pirates faded into obscurity, unknown to the future generations. Shanks, still unconscious inside the treasure chest, was discovered by the Roger pirates. They had no idea whose child he was, no knowledge of his connection to Figgle and Garling. They raised him as one of their own, making him an apprentice. Decades later, Shanks would become one of the Yonko, inheriting Roger's will and protecting the balance of the world. Figgle and Shamrock was taken by Satchel's Maffy back to Merijo. He was raised as a world noble, eventually becoming commander of the God Knights. He knew of his brother Shanks, but also knew Shanks had renounced his birthright, choosing to remain in the lower world as a pirate. Bartholomew Kuma successfully saved over 500 people using his Nikyu Nikyu no Mi powers, including Ivankov, Ginny, Marshall D. Teach, and Eris. These survivors scattered across the world, most of them eventually joining the Revolutionary Army or living quiet lives in hiding. Dragon, who was traumatized by the horrors that he witnessed, began questioning everything about the Marines and the world government. He'd seen world nobles hunt children for sport, he'd seen the government orchestrate genocide, and he'd been ordered to round up civilians for slaughter. This exposure to systemic evil planted the seeds for his eventual defection. Dragon would form the Freedom Fighters, which later became the Revolutionary Army, an organization dedicated to overthrowing the world government and the Celestial Dragons. Scopper Gaban, the left hand of the Pirate King, eventually retired from piracy. He settled in Elbaf over 20 years ago, living under the alias Yasan. He married Ripley and had a son named Colin. Gaban kept his identity a secret, living peacefully while staying informed about the world's events. Gloriosa returned to Amazon Lily, but never got over her lovesickness for Roger. She eventually recovered and became an advisor to future empresses. Silver's Rayleigh and Shakuyaku stayed together, and following Roger's execution, Rayleigh became the coating mechanic on Shabudi Archipelago, while Shaki reopened her bar there. Eris and Teach survived, but Rocks never found them in Lelusia. Teach grew up without his father, eventually joining the Whitebeard Pirates, then betraying them to form the Blackbeard Pirates. The world government's cover-up of the God Valley incident was very thorough. CP6 agents tracked down every witness that they could find. Marines who'd been present were reassigned to remote locations or given promotions in exchange for silence. Pirates who survived were hunted down if they tried to speak about it. Journalists who investigated God Valley disappeared. Sengoku later admitted to Garp that one Marine had reported rumors about the native hunting competition before it happened. That Marine vanished without a trace, likely killed by CP agents to prevent the information from spreading. The God Valley incident fundamentally shaped the modern One Piece world. Every major power structure traces back to that day. The four Yonko exist because Rocks' crew disbanded and formed their own legendary crews. The Revolutionary Army exists because Dragon witnessed the world government's atrocities. The Marines' corruption and Garp's principled stance against promotion stem from that day. The world government's paranoia about the Davy family and their fear of Emu being exposed, their desperate attempts to control Elbaf, all of it traces back to Rocks revealing his true identity and Emu having to personally intervene. And the promise Rocks mentioned, the promise tied to Davy D. Jones and Joy Boy, remains unfulfilled. Emu was so afraid of this promise that he personally descended to God Valley. Emu stated that they wanted to subjugate Elbaf because the giants would determine the victor of the coming Great War. Emu knew even back then that a massive conflict was inevitable. Rocks proclaimed that Davy D. Jones was once king of the world. Emu denied it, but their fury suggested that Rocks had struck a nerve. Whatever promise was made 800 years ago, whatever role Joy Boy and Davy D. Jones played in the lost history, it's connected to the conflict that's brewing today. The God Valley incident was a preview of the final war. Emu's intervention, the slaughter of the Davy family, the attempted genocide of God Valley's population, these were desperate acts by a government terrified of losing control. And despite all of of their efforts, they failed to eliminate the Davy bloodline. Marshal D Teach survived, the revolutionary army formed, and the descendants of the Will of D continued to spread. God Valley is an incredible prologue to the endgame of One Piece. But we have now reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What are your thoughts about this complete retrospective of the God Valley incident? If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in my next One Piece video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.